My name is Sabile Trimm, and I'm a libertarian. I believe in free speech, free enterprise, freedom of association, civil liberties, property rights, democracy, and basically all things related to freedom. I'm speaking to various experts as I explore topics that affect the liberty of Canadians. Welcome to Liberty Lovers. Today, I'm speaking with Rael Laverne, president of Fair Vote Canada, an advocacy group for proportional representation in our government. They are nonpartisan and advocate provincially and federally. But first, what is proportional representation? The system we use now in Canada is called first past the post, named after horse racing, where the first horse to pass the post wins the race. In voting, that means the candidate with the most votes wins. Well, what's wrong with that? The problem is that with first past the post, the results don't represent the votes cast. Here's an example from the 2011 federal election in Canada. The percentage of the seats don't match the percentage of the vote. And in the 2015 federal election, the Liberals won 54% of the seats with just 40% of the vote. Sometimes the results are a bit off, but sometimes they're really skewed. Look at the New Brunswick election in 1987. So how does this happen? It's because we have regional ridings, where we elect one candidate. However the candidate wins, whatever the percentage was, the votes that went to the losing parties are lost or wasted. As this happens over and over again in other ridings, the sum of the wasted votes gets bigger, and the difference between the election results and the votes cast becomes greater. So let's say, instead of the 30 ridings in this example, you have 10 ridings with 3 elected in each, or 3 ridings with 10 candidates in each. There are the same number of seats, but fewer regions. There are different ways to elect multiple candidates, but mechanics aside, the result is less votes that are thrown out as the regions get bigger. As you move towards one region, you get perfect proportionality. For example, if a party wins 22% of the vote, it gets 22% of the seats. In this case, none of the votes are wasted. And that's what it's all about, making every vote count. I met Rael at the elegant Lord Elgin Hotel in Ottawa, just steps away from Parliament, and we had an interesting discussion about proportional representation as Canada's electoral system.
I happened to retire at a time when there was a lot of dissatisfaction with the Harper government. Yeah. The thing about Harper is that he was elected with only 39.5% of the vote, but he governed as though he had dictatorial powers, to be blunt.
Yeah.
Including changing the nature of our electoral system in ways that favored his party. And that really peeved a lot of people. Yeah. People are naturally conservative, and they will tend to vote for the devil they know over the devil they don't know.
Yeah.
And so if you start telling them that with proportional representation, extremists will come to power, or Vancouver is going to make all the decisions, and you people in rural areas will no longer have any power, as if they have any now. Yeah. Those kinds of things, people are listening, and if you repeat them often enough, people start to believe them.
What can you say about somebody who's against proportional representation? To me, that's kind of nuts. Like, who would say, I don't want the results to reflect the votes that were cast?
Yeah, it's like on a principled basis, I think it's really, really hard.
Yeah.
I do believe some people actually believe the extremists' argument.
Yeah.
And in a way, it's true. It's any smaller party can get seats.
Yeah.
Like the Libertarians,
that
they could not get under first past the post.
Yeah.
The thing about first past the post that you need to know to understand how it works is that it gives a premium of seats to the leading party.
Yeah.
And that premium is represented in losses to the parties that came in second, third, fourth, and fifth. And the lower you are down the chain, the greater your losses. So that's why the Libertarians get no seats at all. That's why the Greens get 1 seat in the whole country. Don't forget that a lot of people are not voting Green because they don't want to waste their votes.
That's the worst part. Because if you're not voting for who you want, then can you really call it democracy if you can't vote for who you want?
Yeah, but think about it from the Greens now. Yes, they got, I think it was 3.5%, or maybe it was 4.5. I don't remember which of the two numbers, but it's around there. Let's say 4.
Yeah.
at least twice that much. And this is where your 10% comes in. The Greens could get 10% or close to 10% if people were voting knowing that their votes would count.
Exactly.
So the bias is even greater than what we see.
I don't think there's a bad thing at all about having diversity in government. And if people had, if they felt their vote counted, I mean, I think people would be more involved politically and pay more attention and hold government to account. Instead of just playing this like laissez-faire attitude, like, well, I'll just let them take care of it. I don't want to get involved with politics. It's messy and dirty anyway. And they know if your voting experience is always that you're just voting strategically for the person that you don't, it's just against, okay, I don't want him to get in, so I'm going to vote for her, but it's not, you're never really voting for who you wanted.
It's never very exciting.
That's not a very good experience.
It's not very exciting. And I think people would also be excited by having more real choice. You go to the polls and all you have a choice is between, let's say, a conservative or a liberal, or maybe a liberal or NDP here in Ottawa Centre. You know, it's not always the same too. But you only have the two choices, and a lot of the time you might not like either choice. Like what happened in the States between Trump and Hillary Clinton. A lot of people felt they didn't really like either one.
It's true.
So who do you vote for? Well, you could vote Green, but you're wasting your vote. So a real choice where you know that you've got several parties you could vote for, and your vote's going to count to elect somebody to represent you from that party, one way or another. You know ahead of time, more or less, that you're not going to get a single party that controls everything. Which is what we have right now. Elected dictatorships is what we have right now.
It's true.
So you know you're not going to have that. So that's a huge comfort. And now you can affect the distribution of that. You know, you want to vote Green, you're going to have more Greens. Or you want to vote Conservative, you're going to have more Conservatives. That is how open is the system that you're putting in to electing independents. Because independents can create a great counter pressure to parties, as happened in Ireland in the last election. They elected 16% independents because they were fed up with the parties. They didn't like either of the major two parties, so it just like split wide open. It was very interesting.
But in Ireland, people are very political. I mean, they're talkative, they're emotional, they have views, and part of the problem with Canada is we're just like flatline. Like, I don't think people get excited about politics here. Not very much.
Well, I think maybe it's because people don't have as much choice.
Or is it that we're just too happy and comfortable?
Well, that probably has something to do with it.
But I mean,
except we're getting less happy and less comfortable.
Well, it's true. It's like the debt load that Canadians are willing to take on is relatively high compared to other countries. And I think part of that is a false sense of security, that we just feel safe. You know, we have like free health care and
that helps.
And it's
and
you know
pensions.
Pensions and low crime. So people feel protected, but actually you could go bankrupt and nobody's going to come save your house for you. That house the bank can take it. So what would you say about spoiling ballots? Like, what do you think about that? Does that do anything?
It's kind of an invisible act, isn't it? I think I think I just wouldn't bother to vote if I was going to spoil my ballot. But I've always voted. I've never missed an election in my life.
Yeah, me too.
But I do it out of duty.
You
know, one of the things about deciding whether your vote counts or not is to look at what kind of riding you live in. If you're in a swing riding and you don't know whether it's going to go between party X or party Y, what you want to do is vote for either X or Y. And try to increase the chances of that party winning. So at least you're not going to waste your vote. You may not be voting for who you want, but you won't waste your vote.
But I live in strategic voting.
That's strategic. Of course it's strategic, but it's better than nothing. Your vote counts. I live in Vanier. Vanier has voted Liberal federally since Confederation.
Really?
And they voted Liberal provincially for as long as I can remember as well. The interesting thing about that, it doesn't really matter who I vote for, because even if I vote Liberal, they're going to win anyway, so my vote's wasted even if I vote Liberal. And if I vote for any of the opposition parties, my vote's wasted, so what the heck's the point?
There should also never really be something like as a safe riding, because the other parties should have so much of a chance that that party that won their seat should always be working hard to keep it.
Yeah, a safe seat is a non-accountable seat. Some people say in some seats, you could run a signpost for that party and the signpost would win. Well, the signpost isn't going to be very accountable. And you can't punish a politician if the politician is going to stay in power indefinitely, which is what can also happen. So with proportional representation and every vote actually counting, then a party's share of seats will go up and down in direct function, as a direct function of their ability to win votes.
Yeah. I heard a counter argument that someone said, if we had proportional representation, the size of government would increase. That's not true.
There's no reason why it has to be true.
There's no reason why.
No.
It could, but it doesn't have to.
The only really good argument for the size of government increasing is to buy off the politicians. The thing is that as you transition from first past the post to proportional representation, some MPs or MPPs have to, by definition, lose their seats. Now, I'll give you a good example. Currently, in the Atlantic provinces, the Liberals have 100% of the seats. But they got about 52, 54% of the vote. So with proportional representation, instead of 100% of the seats, they'd have about 52%. So that means about half. Never mind the vagaries of the electoral system and all that. Whoever you are, half of them are going to go out under a proportional system. So you lose your caucus. So to avoid losing the caucus to quite the same extent, you can say, well, in making the transition, we will add some seats, so fewer of you will have. You don't say that. You can't say that. You're not allowed to say that exactly. But that's essentially what you're doing.
I was looking at the fairvote.org website, the American one.
Oh, okay.
And they were talking a lot about the ranked ballots. And so, for example, in Maine, they have a ballot where they have the list of all the candidates and whether they belong to a party or not. And you put your first choice, second choice, third choice, all the way down. And I find that's easy to understand. And that way you're always, because in your mind, you already are ranking them, right? You have the person you want to vote for, and then you assess, do they have a chance or not? And then you think, well, they don't have a chance, so I'm going to strategically vote for my second choice so that this other guy doesn't get in. So you're already participating in a ranking. But you have to make a guess over if you think your first choice has a win or not. So why not acknowledge that, have a ranked ballot, and that, for me, of all the systems, look to the easiest.
Yeah, you know that's not proportional, of course.
That's not proportional?
It's not a proportional system. It's majoritarian. And the advantage to the winning party could actually be larger. Well, I don't know how they're doing it in Maine, but normally you're retaining the single member district, single member riding. So there's only one winner. Now that one winner, once you've done the ranked ballot and the counting and so on, will have 50%, you manufacture a majority for that winner. So you might have 35% of first votes, and then you're picking up some second and third votes until you get to 50. You can still get, so I'm going to give you an example here. Let's suppose that you won a majority in 51% of all the seats. Well, you have majority government now, right? With that? Okay. Let's suppose you get 0 votes in the rest of the seats. And you got 50% in half the seats.
You mean if I got picked first choice?
You could put it that way, or even in general. Even with the second choices. You just make 50 in over half the seats, and you get 0 everywhere else. We do your math. That party has about 1/4 of the national vote, and they have a majority government. So that's the same kind of phenomenon as we get now. You end up manufacturing a government out of the results at the riding level. So if you do really well in half of the ridings, you've got your majority government. It doesn't necessarily mean you've got half of the vote.
But so then, would you agree that the root problem of the electoral system not representing the vote count is the fact that we have regional representation. Because if we just had one vote for a party, and then somehow that, that translated to so many seats. So let's say we had 50 seats in government, and then the percentage translated to so many seats, and then the party decides how they want to fill up those seats.
Yeah.
Then you would have, that's the only way to truly have
That's right.
zero wasted seats. And you know what I noticed when I ran for the Libertarian Party in the last provincial election? There was the Conservatives, Liberals, NDP, Green, and Libertarians. And the NDP candidate was, in his public speaking skills and background, the weakest of all of us. Like, just not even like a personal attack, just he was the weakest in his delivery and everything. But in the election results, he won second. I mean, the Conservatives won 50-some%, and then he had 20.
Okay.
And what that proved to me was it didn't matter what our performance was on the, on the floor, like on the election campaign. How well I did in my speeches, how well I did in my debates.
Didn't count for much, eh?
All that mattered was the party. The people voted for the party. They didn't vote for the candidate at all.
Yeah, the problem is that people are rational.
Yeah,
they're voting party because that's how it works.
Okay, so if we're admitting that people are just voting for the parties anyway, and they don't even are considering who their local candidate is, and they're not voting for their local candidate, then we should probably be pushing for a system like what I just described, because that's the most accurate results for proportional representation you would have. Does regionality really matter that much? You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, you're using the word regionality. What you mean...
What do I mean? Yeah.
And you hit upon it. What makes our system distorted, what distorts it, is that we elect our representatives one at a time.
Yes.
Okay? And you're calling that a region. You could call it a district, you call it a riding.
Yeah.
The reason I champ a bit at the expression region is that in mixed member proportional, you are using regions. So you can have a regionally based proportional system.
Yeah.
But what makes the difference between a majoritarian system and a proportional system is that you elect more than one representative at a time. You want perfect proportionality?
Yeah.
You have to have one representative for each citizen.
Well,
then you would have perfect proportionality.
Well, there's another way to do it. My way would also do it. I think that way is called the Wild West, where it's every man for himself.
And that's one of the problems that a ranked ballot does solve. It's not like a ranked ballot has no value. The voter gets to express him or herself better. The vote splitting issue is addressed. You don't have to worry about strategic voting in the same way. So it's got a lot of value. But it may make some things worse. Because it may, the example that was thrown about a lot during the parliamentary consultations on electoral reform in 2016 was that people thought the ranked ballot would favor the Liberals because there's a middle party. So they'd be the second vote for Conservatives and the second vote for NDP and first vote for Liberals, right?
So would that make them win if they had everyone's second vote?
That's what people thought.
Well, that's
now, it's not necessarily true, but it's a reasonable hypothesis. That and that why does Trudeau like ranked ballots so much? Well, maybe because he thinks it'll favor the Liberals.
Yeah. The reason I asked about the Alberta is that they have new parties that form, and then they make it, right? Like a party can form, like the Reform Party or the Red Rose Party or whatever, and then they're actually, a person on the scene, like they're in.
Okay, now you've got two different cases there. One is federal, one is provincial, right?
Yeah.
So to understand what happened with reform, you have to understand another bias, another distortion of first past the post, which is that regional parties can do very well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if they can become in their region the party that comes in first, they can take all the seats. That's why in 1993, the Bloc Québécois formed the opposition.
Yeah. Imagine.
Nationwide. They took like almost all the seats in Quebec.
So strange.
Yeah, and their share of the vote wasn't that high.
Yeah. So if you have concentrated votes in an area where you could get a seat, then a party that should be fringe ends up having more say than it would have.
Yeah, and that's what allows a small party to emerge under first past the post.
So let's say we did have a diverse government. Then how is Doug Ford, who won, supposed to accomplish anything when he's in Parliament and anytime he wants to get something done, he has all these other parties in there arguing with him, and so he can't actually do anything because he has to constantly be making compromises.
That's right.
And so what about that?
That's where dictatorship's better than democracy.
Yeah.
You want to get things done, dictatorships are great. Mussolini made the trains run on time.
When you have a dictatorship, you know, even let me just say as a scientist myself, they were able to accomplish a lot of things economically and industrially. You know, things were invented and it was a boom. I'm not saying I'm pro-Nazi, but when you have a dictatorship, you can make certain things happen. So if you have all this diversity, you can't accomplish anything. You just have to have a watered down version of any idea instead of having the full idea and giving that a try for 4 years. What about that?
That's the argument. I don't buy it, but that's the argument. And in my personal experience, I feel that that argument has a lot of validity. I'd like to be able to rule my family the good old-fashioned way.
Yeah.
A good patriarchy, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I always find that's a way of putting it that people quickly appreciate the folly of that argument. You can make decisions more easily if you do them in a dictatorial way, but are they going to be the best decisions for the community? And I think most of the time that's not the case.
Yeah.
You're going to get better decisions if they are more considered decisions, if you can't do things on a whim.
Yeah.
Good example is Kinder Morgan.
Okay.
Trudeau could not have done Kinder Morgan
Yeah.
in the way that he did it. He basically rammed it through.
Yeah, that was extremely shocking to me. Like, don't you feel like, oh my gosh, I think my blood's boiling right now, just remembering that. I mean, the people of British Columbia voted their government in, they had a say, and the people of Alberta had a say, and there was a process to go through to negotiate, and then Justin Trudeau just came in and said, no negotiating, no questions, I'm going to make this happen, end of discussion. It's like when you have two bickering kids and you're like, I don't want to hear it, just stop.
So I'm just giving that as an example that when one party has all the power, they can basically ram things through against the popular interest and without the kind of consideration that is required in order to get a policy that will be stable and durable. And so what we end up with when you compare countries that have proportional representation and first past the post countries is that policy tends to be more long-lasting in proportional representation countries. And it tends also to pay more attention to long-term interests of the population.
Well, I think that's really the counter-argument.
Yeah.
Because if you have someone just bulldozing their policies through, like their way,
they're unstable.
Then people are going to be annoyed. They vote for the other side, and then they'll just undo it.
Yeah.
And then you don't go anywhere. So what might have seemed like efficiency is actually not efficient. But there's a lot of people in the Libertarian Party that are, that are against so much gun control because they're saying, criminals are going to get their hands on the guns anyway. All you're doing is just stopping law-abiding citizens from having guns. Whether you agree with that argument or not, but was that point of view ever expressed in Parliament and debated on?
Probably not, eh?
No, because that point of view is kind of limited to a small group of people. And most people don't actually have an opinion on gun control, other than they just don't like guns, they know they're dangerous.
Yeah.
But even if a minority group had some kind of say in government, there's a point of view that isn't being expressed. It's like you just wouldn't know.
Yeah, my son-in-law points out that the abortion issue, he's a social conservative, he's a fundamentalist Christian, and he and I can have a conversation about abortion.
Yeah.
But he says there's nobody, even under Harper, who is prepared to stand up in the House and talk about it.
True.
So even the most aberrant aspects of the abortion debate, and I won't go into examples that he gave, but things that are, you know, maybe you don't want that.
Yeah.
Even that's not being talked about.
Yeah.
Because it's taboo. And nobody's prepared to go on the line for that. Whereas if the Christian Heritage Party had a couple of seats, well, those people would be up there and could, you know, try to find how you could accommodate that constituency somehow.
Yeah,
in some, even if it's partial.
That's a very good example. Yeah, because in the mainstream parties, they won't touch the delicate subjects.
Exactly.
But the extreme parties do, because obviously if you're part of an extreme party, you're probably principled in some point.